sac, which is made up of visceral and parietal layer, and it is separated by a potential space which is called as the pericardial space or cavity. Okay, so it has two layers, visceral and parietal layer. Okay, so in healthy individual, the pericardial cavity contains only 15 to 50 ml of ultrafiltrate. That is nothing but your plasma. Okay, so it contains only 15 to 50 ml of plasma. Now, what is the reason for having this plasma inside this cavity? So the functions of pericardium are it lubricates the surface of the heart. So it helps in lubrication. Second is it acts as a barrier for the infection. Third thing is it limits the distension of the heart and contributes to hemodynamic interdependence of the ventricle. Okay, these are all the basic things or the functions of pericardium. Okay, main thing you have to understand here is it contains only 15 to 50 ml. So anything beyond 50 ml, we call it as pericardial effusion. Okay. So now we can see this is the heart wall. Okay, this is the heart wall. Sorry. So this one is the myocardium. So this is the myocardium, and next to your myocardium is the pericardium. This is your pericardium. Okay. So the pericardial cavity they have marked here. Can you see pericardial cavity? So this is the cavity in between the visceral pericardium and the parietal pericardium. Okay, and this sac only we are going to discuss now. The sac lies here. Okay. So what are all the major causes of pericardial diseases? Okay. First and foremost, you have to understand is the infection. Okay. Infection most commonly it is due to viral or tubercular etiology. Okay. Second most common will be the neoplasm. So in neoplasm, we have all kind of neoplasm with secondary metastasis to your pericardial sac. In that we have lung or breast cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, leukemia, and melanoma. All these things can have a metastasis inside your pericardial cavity. And anything having primary tumor of your pericardium, which is rhabdomyosarcoma, teratoma, fibroma, lipoma, all those OMAs, okay? All those things can cause pericardial diseases. Third thing is your intracardiac cause. So inside your heart, what are all the reasons for pericardial disease? Early infarction, that is after your myocardial infarction, you may get a acute pericarditis. Second thing is late post-cardiac injury syndrome, which is nothing but your Dressler syndrome. Third thing is your myocarditis and dissectic aortic aneurysm. The next common cause will be your autoimmune cause. So what are all the autoimmune causes in place of pericardial disease? First thing is your rheumatic disease. Okay. So in rheumatic disease, it includes lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, vasculitis, scleroderma, and mixed connective tissue. All these things favors a pericardial effusion and acute pericarditis. And other systemic involves like your Vigenous disease, polyarteritis nodosa, inflammatory bowel disease, which is your Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, Behçet disease, and giant cell arteritis. Okay, and drugs. What are all the drugs causing pericardial diseases? A very important question for your clinical viva. Okay, procainamide, isoniazid, hydralazine, phenytoin, penicillin, doxorubicin. All these things can cause pericardial diseases. And what are all the metabolic disorders which causes pericardial disease or effusion? First and foremost is your hypothyroidism. Due to volume overload state, you get primary pericardial effusion. Second thing is uremia. Again, In case of chronic kidney diseases where there is volume overload state, you get pericardial effusion. And something called as ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, where you get ascites and pericardial effusion in this type of syndrome. Very rarely you get trauma, a blunt or a penetrating injury to pericardium. Second thing is iatrogenic, where during any surgical procedure or insertion of your pacemaker or during your CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, you may get a pericardial disease. Okay, this is a quite important tablet column where you can cover almost all the cardiac as well as systemic as well as rheumatic origin causing pericardial diseases. Okay, next we have seen first and foremost is your infection. So infection, viral infection predominates pericardial diseases. So first thing is your Coxsackie virus, echo, adeno, whatever, any kind of viral illness can lead on to pericardial diseases and pericarditis. Okay. Second thing is your bacterial. Bacterial, all again, empty number of bacteria are there. Most common thing will be your Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Pneumococcus, and Haemophilus. Tuberculosis is very common. That too in young children, when you see pericardial effusion, you have to first and foremost rule out tubercular etiology. Next thing is your mycoplasma. Next, very rarely you get fungal infections like histoplasmosis, aspergillosis, blastomycosis, and all other fungi. Fungi is quite rare when you compare with viral and bacterial etiology. And parasitic again you can get a echinococcus or an amoebiasis or a toxoplasmosis. Infective endocarditis with valve ring abscess. Okay, so all these are infections which causes pericarditis. So what is the pathophysiology of pericardial diseases? Okay, so first is your etiology, whatever it may be, a rheumatic origin or an infection or an intracardiac cause, whatever it is. So it induces your inflammatory response and it influxes the neutrophils and other chemical mediators. Okay, and this causes change in your permeability of your pericardial vascularity. Right. Next, it leads to pericardial inflammation and edema. At last, what is going to happen? There is restriction of heart movement and pain while breathing. That pain while breathing we call this a pleuritic type of pain. Okay, so this is in short which lead on to your pericardial diseases. So first and foremost is your inflammatory response. Okay, that is more important in this. So now we move on to the diseases of pericardium in detail. Okay, so the diseases of the pericardium present clinically in one of the four ways. First thing is your acute and recurrent pericarditis. Second thing is your chronic constrictive pericarditis. Third thing is your pericardial effusion without any major hemodynamic compromise. Fourth thing is your cardiac tamponade. Okay. So pericarditis classification. How do you classify pericarditis? First thing is your acute. Acute means less than 6 weeks of duration. So it can be a effusion type or a fibrinous type. Okay. Subacute, 6 weeks to 6 months. There you can get a effusion that is constrictive or a plain constrictive. Okay. Third thing is your chronic. Chronic more than 6 months. In this you can have a effusion type or an adhesive type or a constrictive type. Okay, we'll be looking in detail. Okay, this is just a classification based on the duration of symptoms. So acute pericarditis, what does it mean? It refers to the inflammation of the pericardial sac. Okay, so acute pericarditis is the most common disorder involving the pericardium. Okay, most common disorder involving the pericardium. Okay. So what is the clinical presentation? The patient will have a sudden onset of pain. Okay. Where the pain? They usually call this a chest pain. Okay. So it is a retrosternal type of chest pain, sharp and pleuritic type. Already I discussed what is pleuritic type. It increases or aggravates during your respiration. Okay. So it is a retrosternal pain, sharp and pleuritic type of pain, exacerbated by inspiration or coughing. Okay. And it worsens when you are in a supine position and improves upon sitting upright or leaning forward. Okay. So you just imagine and see when the patient lies in supine position, it worsens. It improves on sitting upright or leaning forward. This is the typical description of acute pericardial chest pain. Okay. And it often radiates to the arm or neck or the trapezius muscle. With your stethoscope, what can you hear? We call it as a friction rub. Okay. So it is almost 85% of the pericardial, that is pericarditis patient can have this. So it is a high pitch, scratchy or a squeaky sound best heard with the diaphragm at the left sternal border, and the patient should be leaning forward. Okay. So usually it is heard during the systole, but also in diastole, and it is of to and fro quality. All these things can be appreciated only when you come for clinical class. Okay. Nothing beyond this we can talk in theory. Only when you hear with a stethoscope, you can see that it is a frictional rub. Okay. Pericardial frictional rub is audible throughout the respiratory cycle, whereas the pleural rub disappears when respiration are on hold. Okay. So whenever you want to hear a frictional rub in pericarditis patient, the patient should always inspire and expire. When the patient is withholding his respiration, you cannot hear. Pleural rub disappears. Okay. So what are the ECG findings in pericarditis? Okay. So we grade it up accordingly through the stages. So stage 1 is hours to days. So there will be diffuse ST elevation with upward concavity. Okay, you just remember ST elevation. We'll look into the ECG. Okay. Second stage will be, it is characterized by normalization of the ST segment and PR segment. Okay. In stage 3, you will have diffuse T wave inversion. And in stage 4, you will have normalization of the ECG or indefinite persistence of T wave inversion. Okay. Now, what is very important here is PR interval depression is a very specific indicator of pericarditis. Okay. Now we look into the ECG. So can you see widespread ST elevation in lead 1, 2, AVL, V1 and V6. I think you can able to follow. Okay. Here you can see the ST elevation. Can you able to make out? There is slight ST elevation and concavity of your ST segment. You know, all these things you should appreciate.
Yes, sir.
So what are all the other investigations other than the ECG? ECG is a bedside screening tool. Okay, it can easily give us a clue that this patient is having impending pericarditis. Okay, now when you do an echocardiogram, it is often normal unless there is a acute pericardial effusion. Okay, chest X-ray typically normal unless the pericardial sac is more than 50 ml of fluid. And signs of inflammation, when you do a complete blood count, you can see elevation in WBC count, and ESR and CRP are both acute inflammatory response. So ESR is erythrocyte sedimentation rate and CRP is C-reactive protein. So both these are acute inflammatory markers where both are elevated in case of acute pericarditis. And sometimes cardiac biomarkers like your troponin I or troponin T may get increased lightly. So what is the treatment of acute pericarditis? Our main goal is to relieve the pain and resolution of inflammation. So to reduce the inflammation, we give NSAIDs. What is NSAID?
Non-steroidal
Yeah, very good.
analgesic
Anti-inflammatory drug.
anti-inflammatory drugs. Yes, sir.
So NSAIDs are recommended for all patients for a duration of 2 weeks. And the very good drug will be your aspirin. Aspirin high dose, 600 milligrams, 6 times a day. Okay, it's a very, 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 very high dose. Okay, normally we give up to 150 milligrams for cardiac patients. Now it is 600 milligrams, and that to 6 times a day. So almost 3.6 grams per day. Okay. Second drug will be ibuprofen, 600 to 800 milligrams, or indomethacin, 25 to 50 milligrams TDS, along with gastric protections like your proton pump inhibitor, which is like your pantoprazole, omeprazole, all those drugs. And the duration of therapy is to 1 to 2 weeks and then slowly tapered over several weeks until the chest pain resolves. Okay. Now, what are the newer drugs? Colchicine can also be given, which enhances the response to NSAIDs. What about steroids? Yeah, any doubt? Okay. Glucocorticoids may be tried in patients who do not tolerate or they fail to respond to NSAIDs or colchicine. In case of purulent pericarditis, you have to start the patient on antibiotics and pericardiocentesis or surgical drainage if necessary. Next, we move on to chronic constrictive pericarditis. So, as the name indicates, chronic and constrictive. So, chronic means what is the duration of onset of symptoms?
More than 6 months.
6 months. Okay. So, due to the progressive thickening, fibrosis, and calcification of the pericardium, at least for the duration of 6 months, slowly it starts developing into chronic and it lead on to constrictive type. So it stops the ventricular function here. In effect, the heart is encased in a solid shell and therefore cannot fill properly. That is the most important thing you have to understand here. Constrictive pericarditis. So it doesn't allow the heart to function normally. Calcification may also extend into the myocardium, thereby reducing myocardial contractility also. So when does it occur? It usually follows after an attack of tuberculous pericarditis or a viral pericarditis or rheumatoid arthritis or an infective purulent pericarditis. So what are all the clinical features? Symptoms include easy fatiguability. Any type of inflammation in your body can lead on to fatigue, weakness, weight gain, increased abdominal girth, leg swelling, and exertional dyspnea. Similar like your right ventricular failure, where you get ascites, bilateral leg swelling, increased JVP. All those things can be seen here also. Exertional dyspnea, leg swelling, increased abdominal girth, weight gain. Okay. So what are all the signs of constrictive pericarditis? Very important. Okay. So there will be a rapid and low volume pulse. Since this dampens or hampers your ventricular filling, your volume of the pulse will be low. there will be elevation of JVP. Next thing is your Kussmaul sign, where you get a paradoxical rise in JVP during inspiration. Okay, normally you get, what do you get? You get decrease in JVP. But now there is a paradoxical rise in JVP during inspiration. And what is pulses paradoxes? As the name indicates, pulses paradoxes, but nothing to do with pulse. Okay. Again, you make a mistake in exam. What is pulses paradoxes? Now you will answer this is a type of pulse. Okay. No, it is excessive fall in BP during inspiration. Kindly note it down. Pulses paradoxes. It is an excessive fall in BP during inspiration. And pericardial knock. This is usually a early third heart sound and it is loud in character. And again, I discussed already ascites, hepatomegaly, pedal edema. All these things are right heart failure features. Okay. So what is the treatment? Now the patient is having enormous amount of fluid all over the body. Okay. So you have to restrict the salt intake. Whenever you decrease the salt intake, obviously your water content also decreases. Second important thing is your diuretics. Okay. Diuretics again reduces the excess of your volume in third spaces. So pericardial resection is the only definitive treatment. You have to do a pericardial resection. So supportive treatment only is your salt restricted diet and diuretics. Next thing we move on to is the pericardial effusion. Okay. So it is a collection of excess fluid in the pericardial cavity. Okay. So the characteristic ECG finding of pericardial effusion is electrical alterance. Okay. What is that? When the QRS complex alternate in amplitude due to the to and fro motion of the heart within the fluid-filled pericardial sac. Okay. So it's a quite simple thing. QRS complex keep on alternating in amplitude. Okay. And echocardiography is the definitive investigation and is used to monitor the size of the effusion and cardiac function. So can you able to see? Red color is a normal thing. In between you are getting a small amplitude which is marked by your blue color arrowheads. Okay. So this is your alterance. Okay. Electrical alterance. And can you see the low voltage complex? So when you compare your standard sizes here, this is the standard size. So when you compare your ECG with the standard size, the whole ECG is of low voltage. Okay. And there is a sinus tachycardia where the heart rate is around 120 to 130 per minute. Okay. So this is electrical alterance. And the final thing, acute emergency condition is your cardiac tamponade. Okay. So it describes as acute heart failure due to compression of the heart by a large or rapidly developing effusion. Okay. Pericardial effusion is not an emergency condition, but cardiac tamponade is an emergency condition. Okay. So where you get acute heart failure due to compression of the heart by a large effusion or a rapidly developing effusion. Okay. And this condition may be quite fatal if not recognized and treated promptly. Okay. And the quantity of fluid necessary to produce tamponade is usually 200 ml when fluid develops rapidly, or more than 2000 ml in a slowly developing pericardial effusion. Okay. And the pericardium has time to stretch and adapt. Okay. So these two are the important numbers. 200 ml when it develops very rapidly, or 2000 ml when it is slowly developing. Okay. So what is the clinical feature which is for your cardiac tamponade? It is called as Beck's triad, B-E-C-K, Beck's triad. Okay. Where you get Beck's triad, low blood pressure, muffled heart sound, and distension of your jugular veins. Okay, it is a medical emergency condition, right? So buildup of fluid, blood or air in the pericardial sac, which compresses the heart pumping capacity. Okay, and again you have to understand that not everyone with cardiac tamponade will show all three signs of Beck triad. Not always. It is not possible to have all the three clinical signs. Okay, other signs like tachycardia and shortness of breath may also be present. So you should correctly pick up the Beck's triad. Able to follow?
Yes, sir.
And what is this pericardiocentesis? This is an important procedure, an emergency procedure where you aspirate pericardial fluid for diagnostic as well as therapeutic. Okay, so when do you do this diagnostic pericardiocentesis? For finding out the etiology, whether it is due to bacterial or fungal, or it is due to rheumatological origin or anything. Therapeutic, mainly it is used as the treatment of cardiac tamponade. So you have to let out the fluid immediately in order to save the patient's life. Okay, so a needle is inserted under echo guidance. Okay, only under echo guidance, medial to the cardiac apex or below the xiphoid process, and it is directed upward towards the left shoulder. So this is the procedure of pericardiocentesis. All right, only cardiologist and related people can do this, not everybody. Okay, now what are all the complications of pericardiocentesis? What can happen? So unknowingly, when you insert the needle and it touches any nerve bundle or your cardiovascular bundle, what happens? Arrhythmias can occur. There may be damage to the coronary arteries, and there can be a bleeding with exacerbation of tamponade due to injury of the right ventricle. Okay, all these are complications of pericardiocentesis. Okay, I think I covered acute pericarditis, pericardial effusion, as well as cardiac tamponade, which is an emergency condition. Okay, any doubts you have?
So for pericardiocentesis also we'd have to do albumin replacement, sir, as we do for ascites.
It's only 200 ml, no?
Yes. Okay.